Coming up, I actually have a tool that tells me what the most requested song story is from you, our viewers, over the last couple of years out of all the requests. Today, we're going to cover it with an exclusive interview with the songwriter who wrote this 80s classic. Now, it wasn't a huge hit when it first came out, but over time, it's become a powerful anthem that many artists have covered, especially in the last few years. And it shows this legendary band at their very best. It was released in '83. It would pave the way for this band's huge breakout a few years later, where they were arguably the biggest band of the late 80s, with a frontman for the ages. So here's the song, the most requested song from our comments, coming up next. Hey, music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you remember laughing at the sheer cheesiness of the 80s after-school specials, or even if you found them enlightening.
Off with the glasses.
You want to be a full-time part of this channel of nostalgia by subscribing below. Make sure to hit the bell so you always get our daily features. Also, check out more content at our page on Patreon. You can also become an insider, honorary producer, and it helps us keep it a daily channel. So I'm excited to bring you yet another episode from our series, Revelations, where featured artists go deep on their greatest songs and albums. A lot of this you won't find anywhere else. I found out just the other day that over the last few years, the most requested song story from you, our viewers, is this. I gotta be honest with you, I was shocked, very surprised that this is the most requested song story from you, our viewers, because, you know, it wasn't a massive hit. Now, in case you didn't catch it, it's INXS with their 1983 hit, Don't Change, from their first gold record in America, Shabu Shabba. It was actually released a full 4 years before Kick would knock radio out of the park and crown them as one of the biggest bands in the world with their incredibly charismatic frontman, Michael Hutchence, really the Jim Morrison of Generation X, and of course their dynamic songwriting master, Andrew Farriss, who we've done interviews with before on here. Don't Change became an empowering anthem of the times and years later. It was one of the band's most beloved tunes. It has been. Here's the thing. I hate to keep beating this Rock and Roll Hall of Fame dead horse, but how in the hell is INXS not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? They check every box on the so-called list. I mean, in 1988, they were arguably the biggest band on planet Earth. They were right there with, you know, U2 and Def Leppard and Guns N' Roses. As Kick would, really, it was like a greatest hits album. Every song was a potential single. It's ridiculous. It's actually ludicrous. They had hits with several chart toppers, many big hits, including several that could be considered outright standards of the music canon. They also had the influence. I mean, Matty Healy of the 1975 certainly takes after Michael Hutchence in many ways, as do other, you know, pop stars from the 90s to now, from Savage Garden to Harry Styles. If Jim Morrison wrote the book on what a frontman could be, Michael Hutchence of INXS certainly finished it. Now, obviously, their commercial peak started to decline in the mid-90s, and the career of the band was cut short with the loss of Michael Hutchence in '97. But there are plenty of artists that had less continuity in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame than, you know, Hutchence and this band had. And had he lived, he and the band would have undoubtedly made more great music, and they'd easily be selling out stadiums right now because the hits still move the needle. Let's get into the interview with founder and songwriter Andrew Farriss, one of the best guys in the business, on a couple of big songs from Shuba Shuba, including the anthemic classic Don't Change, your most requested song out there, and The One Thing. It was their first top 40 hit in the U.S. As we get into this interview, I do want to thank our sponsor, Zenni Eyewear. You know, spring around the corner, you're going to need some sunglasses. If you're in the market for those or another type of frame, whether prescription or reading glasses or what have you, Zenni has definitely got you covered. Get up to 80% off of the price you would normally pay for glasses. Just click on the info button right up here, and you'll get the best rate from POR. Here's Andrew with the story. Well, let's jump in and talk about around 1980, Just Keep Walking broke. And that hit the top 40 in Australia. It peaked at number 38, and '81, you had several more hits in Australia, and things are starting to come together for you guys and your sound. And then Shabu Shaba, the album released in '82, that was really a breakout album for you guys. Let's talk about The One Thing, because that was the song that I think that's the first INXS song I ever heard. That hit number 14 in Canada, number 30 on the Hot 100 in America, which was really cool, but it hit number 2 on the mainstream rock chart in America. Tell me about that song, Writing, what you remember about it.
Okay. I remember I wrote the music for it, I think in London. Michael and I and Kirk had, from the band, Kirk Pengilly and Michael and myself, had gone over to Los Angeles and New York and then London to meet with record producers and to get an idea of what was going on outside of Australia. And it was kind of funny because we met Bob Clearmountain, of course, the legendary Bob, who's actually mixed 2 of the INXS albums. We met him for that time, and when we were first there in 1982 in New York, we had the recording. We took it to Bob Clearmountain, and we said, because we thought he'd say, "Oh, it's terrible. Let me re-record it for you." And he goes, "Just put it on the radio. It'll be a hit." That's what he said. And I thought it was kind of really cool. That's the thing I immediately liked about Bob, is that Bob's hey, like, I'm Bob Clearmountain, I gotta tell you how it is. He was just like, yeah, what easy guy to talk to, easy to relate to. And the fact that he already admired someone else's work impressed me. I'm like, cool. And that's why we worked with him years later. But the writing of it, I think I wrote the music in London. And then Michael, I think, put the initial part of the lyric for that song and the melody, because I wrote lyrics back then more too in those early years. But he put the lyric to that together. I think One Thing was a very important song because it was also the song that we made this crazy video about a dinner party and some sort of, luxurious, really sort of tasteless video, throwing food around, anyway. So that when we went to Canada later on, Nile Rodgers came backstage to talk to us, and we're like, oh, because we've been listening to Chic and Nile. Because at that point in the early 80s, funk music wasn't cool, really. It was sort of was and sort of wasn't. Like after the 70s and disco and everything, we're punk, we just have to be eights, and then, but we'd started listening to Nile and Chic and other artists, early rappers and all that kind of funk stuff or whatever, because we liked it. But when Nile came backstage, we're like, oh, it's Nile Rodgers, and he comes back and he's like, hey, I want to track something with you guys, and that's how we ended up tracking Original Sin on the next album. Dream on, white boy, dream. Because he'd seen The One Thing and the video on MTV.
Yeah, because that was your first video on MTV.
Yeah, that's right. And then Don't Change was the other one.
One last thing on The One Thing, though, is that it had that signature guitar riff that you were so great at. That's the thing about INXS, about your music, is that you would have a guitar riff that was just as profound as the chorus, that you would remember that song from. And as a kid listening to radio, that's something that always stuck out to me about INXS. And we'll talk about it as we talk about, songs here in a little bit with, like, Devil Inside and everything, is that profound guitar riff. And how do you come up with that? Do you remember what The One Thing, was it just something you're kind of messing around and you...
Okay. What I would do, and the way I used to work, especially with the more funk rock stuff, and I still work like that at times, is I'll loop something that I like. And it's a very modern way to write now, but it wasn't back then. I used to just set like a loop up of some sort, and I just kept playing a piece. And at first I'd record a little bit of it, and I thought, yeah, it's pretty good, I think. And then I'd take a little break, maybe get something to eat or go out for a walk or go out or something. I'd come back and listen to it later on. and I go, it's, you know what, I don't, it's good, but it can be better. And let me try this. And then that's how often I would come up with a lot of those hooks and riffs and things, was just because I'd sit and again, the engineering part of it, right? The construction, I'd actually listen to it and go, I think I can do it better. And I think the other thing that was great with Michael and I as a songwriting team, and one of the ironies of it, people, I think, always fantasized that we would do the classic, you know, co-write thing or sit around with a couple of acoustic guitars. No. We very rarely sat together and actually wrote together. There's a lot of reasons for that. We got on fine. It wasn't a case of that. The way we used to work was that I would do the engineering part of it and work out the music and even the arrangements of a lot of the songs. I kind of had in my head pretty much what I wanted to do. And I used to look at, you're right, I used to look at the hooks and the riffs and the pieces of music were just as important to me as the top line and the lyric and everything. Because I thought, you know what, if this thing stands up on its own without any melody or anything or lyric or anything and people still like it, that's good. Just as a piece of music, you know. And then if we can then get a great lyric and a great melody, there you go. And that was a lot of our thinking. And Michael understood that. We talked about it. And so he would take my music away and he would sort of sit there on his own. And he wasn't a performing musician. When I say that, he's obviously a fantastic singer and vocalist, had great singer, absolutely a musician. But what I mean was he wasn't technically trained. He never learned to play an instrument. And one of the great things about that is that he had no preconception about what's wrong and what's right. So, you know, I'd give him the piece of music or whatever, and he'd come back and go, what do you think of this? And he might have put the lyric or the timing of his lyric or whatever his idea for a melody was somewhere that I would never have thought of putting it. I would never have thought of that because he's not, you know, he's not thinking about technically, oh, I shouldn't do this or I shouldn't do that. And a lot of people have said years later when they listen to our writing, they're like, what is it with your writing with you guys? You don't sound like anybody else. I'm like, yeah, well, that was a lot of our secret weapon, was because Michael didn't have any wrong or right when he sat down and listened to it. He was like, I just want to do it like that. And I'm like, cool, you know, great, you know. Whereas I still, to this day, I'm a bit more technical. If I'm putting lyrics and melody together, I'll tend to not do it right, but I'll tend to try to do it more in a traditional sense, whereas Michael didn't. You know, and that was one of the great things with him. Yeah.
Well, that was great about your partnership, is that
yeah,
you brought something that's really cool. I appreciate you explaining that. Don't Change, always been one of my favorites. Don't change for you. Don't change. The song has a really defiant feel with like Michael Hutchence warding off negativity, you know. I remember him saying something like, everything changes, doesn't it? Nothing lasts forever, even though we want it to last forever. Tell me what you remember about writing it and recording it as a band and what that song means to you.
I think I came up with the riff, you know, the main da 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 on the keyboard, you know. And part of the chorus, and I know Michael wrote the lyric, and but the rest of it, in those years, we were pretty much playing, you know, up to, 7 days a week. Sometimes we do 2 gigs on a weekend as well. So we would do like 9 shows a week. You know, we were lucky to have that much work, actually. But there wasn't a lot of time for us to sit around pontificating about what we should or shouldn't be doing. What do you think? Well, I think, you know, there wasn't a lot of time to do all that, you know. So we would say at a sound check or when we could set up our gear at a gig, on that song, I think we might have been just, you know, this is a song that we've been working on and everyone started playing along with it. And so we decided to call it a band right, you know. Everyone was contributing their ideas and the arrangement or whatever. And so we said, well, hell, that's what it is. You know, it's just one of those things, you know. And it's a great song. I love it. I love Don't Change. One of the weird things about Don't Change is for some reason, I still don't understand. We never played it at the Wembley Stadium show, which has become quite famous that we did. we shot a film there and all that. And we never played it. Like, go figure.
Yeah, I mean, that's usually your encore song in a lot of your shows.
I still don't know why. But we were lucky, very lucky in INXS to have had a career that was very international. It wasn't like we were only successful in 1 or 2 countries. We ended up working in 52 countries. That's a big thing. There's a lot of moving around there. But all that absorption of the culture and different attitudes to things, and religions and people's ideas of what's coming and going in their lives, and that helped us as writers too, because you realize you got to stop being so one-eyed about things. Life can be pretty broad, really.
Well, in 2017, I wanted to notice this about the song, is that it was selected for preservation in the National Film and Sounds Archive Sounds of Australia collection, which is a really prestigious honor. I know that also that you talk about the covers. There was Bruce Springsteen, Rob Thomas, but there's also Brandon Flowers of the Killers. Everclear has covered it. Goo Goo Dolls did it as well. At your last concert in 2012, and Rob Thomas came out and played it with you, or was on the song. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I think you're right. Yeah. Well, how about that? Yeah, I like Rob. I like the guys from Matchbox 20. They're cool. And a great band.
But speaking of connections, Bob Clearmountain, Bruce Springsteen. Bob Clearmountain, of course, mixed Born in the USA. Don't Change is one of those songs that I think it means a lot to people through the generations. It meant something to them when they listened to it in their lives.
Yeah, because I've been working on my solo sort of country rock stuff recently. I've been spending a lot of time again over in Nashville and working with a lot of great artists over there, writers and musicians on my solo stuff. And I played the Bluebird Cafe a couple of times. I was invited to go play there, and I really appreciated that. But I bought a beautiful mandola from Carter's Vintage. I just couldn't resist it in the end. Beautiful instrument, a Gibson. And I've been playing Don't Change on the mandola, and it works.
Wow.
Yeah, it sounds okay. And I think that one of the things that's interesting about Don't Change is it's a funny song. It's like Never Tear Us Apart. It's like a kind of, I don't know how to put it, but it could have been a song 100 years ago because it's easy to play. You know what I mean? You don't have to think about it too much.
Well, around this time after that, Us Festival, playing that, and I've talked to a lot of artists that played that festival. That was really one of the first Coachella in a way, because it was playing a lot of like bands on one day, and another day had because before Woodstock and stuff like that were kind of the same musicians, and this was like the new wave day, and then the kind of the classic rock day. And is there something that stands out to you about the Us Festival that you remember?
Oh man, that thing blew my mind. I got to tell you, there was a 250,000 people. Yeah, out in that desert. And there was a big dust bowl as well. And I remember walking on stage, and I just went, whoa, when I walked out on stage, because I'd never seen anything like that. And it was just massive. And the bands that were on it were massive. The Clash and David Bowie and Van Halen, and it was a huge thing, But I remember I got a bit freaked out. And I swear this is true. When I came off stage, I couldn't see any color in my vision. All I could see was black and white. I never had that experience since or before or whatever, but it was a sensory overload. And that's when I look back on things like that with Michael and the performer that he was, and I go, man, how do you do that? That's just incredible. That you get out there and, you kick butt and you swag around and you sing great. And I'm like, dude, that's amazing.
Hey, make sure to leave us a comment about this amazing song in INXS. What are your thoughts on this band and this early album? If Michael Hutchence had lived, would they still be selling out stadiums? I think they would. Do they deserve to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Is it one of the biggest disappointments out there? Let's have a great discussion about this, because I think INXS, one of the greatest bands of the 80s, certainly. And Michael Hutchence, again, just phenomenal frontman. Their songs still resonate. Andrew Farriss, what a great guy. Let's talk about it below. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.